Welcome back to the Sunday Talk Show here on the Arise News Channel, this day live. With me, I have Professor Bola Akintenuwa, Director General, Bolitech Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, and Professor David Awurawo, Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies at the University of Lagos, Nigeria. Well, quickly, Prof, let me start with you, Professor Akintenuwa, here in the studio. You listened to our three guests, in fact. The first two guests talked about the verdict of the Election Petition Tribunal in Osun State, involving the PDP candidate, Governor Senator Ademola Adeleke, and also former Governor Adegboyega Oyetola. And then in the matter, the APC candidate was declared the winner on the grounds that there was overvoting in the July 16 governorship election. And then, of course, we had the opportunity to talk to Mr. Babatunde Ruwashe, former president of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, who commented on the, the decision of the government of the day, the federal government and the CBA, to extend the deadline for the phasing out of the old denominations of 200 naira, 500 naira, and 1,000 naira. Let me start with you for your insights, Professor Akintenuwa.
I think that the court judgment is interesting for various reasons. From the submissions of our invited guests, while I think it's Mr. Tomi Olagunju, who was trying to say, he spoke for APC.
Yes, he did.
Who was trying to say that the best that the PDP can do is to go to court, saying that if the PDP does not believe that there was really a majority judgment, that the best option is to advance to the level of the appeal court. And I think that his suggestion does not appeal to me to have any good logical foundation. If he is saying that the panel is a three-man panel, the decision was 2-1, there are two critical issues that Ashim Abioye drew our attention to that we cannot easily set aside. He drew attention to the judgment of the Supreme Court. I think he was talking about the fact that the court said every judge must put in decision is ruling, their judgment, in black and white, that the idea of a collective signing,
of co-signing,
is not acceptable. If that particular reference is valid, then a barrister of the person of Tomi Olagunju, he has advised him to go and read that, rather than saying, look, you are not satisfied, the next thing is to go to the court. The thinking, I can understand the logical rationale behind Tomi Olagunju's reasoning is to say that, look, when he's saying that if you are not happy, wait. He's trying to say that if you do not, for instance, appeal within the next 21 days provided for by law, then automatically the decision, the judge decision, the judgment will stand self-executing thereafter. But I think that the PDP, from what they have told us, appear to me quite reasonable to say that it is precisely because of what the APC is holding on to that they are going to court. And the argument is so interesting in the sense that, you see, he's saying that the judge judged on the basis of the report of the machine, the Beavers machine, whereas the problematic there is the report of
INEC.
Yes, of INEC. So there are two different things. So if you factor your considerations on the machine, whereas the report says different thing entirely, no, I think he's quite right. Then on the issue of extension, very honestly, I have sympathy for President Muhammadu Buhari because he's most likely to leave a legacy of professional inability to translate whatever he says he wants to do into action. Whether you want to look at the general program or agenda, next level, security, economy, corruption, he has not achieved anything. There is nothing they have said they are going to do that he has not reneged upon. This time now, why should you extend? There is no basis to extend. There is no basis. Whether people, you see, if you look at the former president in Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, he told us how he succeeded. People were always complaining, making life difficult for his government. But he ignored them. He set aside, meanwhile, this issue of human rights, etc., to do that. What did the air pilot president of Ghana do at a point in time? He neutralized all the corrupt people. This is not good. But you see, at the end of the day in Nigeria, since we do not kill ourselves, nobody wants to kill the corrupt people, etc. When you make a law, for God's sake, learn how to keep to it. At least 90 days. It is true. Why should people, royal, traditional obas, emirs, notable people going to lobby? We know quite well that Buhari will always down to all these things. We shouldn't. When you decide, learn how to keep to it. That is how to make, you know, a new life of Nigeria someday.
Prof, the counter-argument to that, I've had some people saying, people who don't have money, it doesn't matter whether you extend or you don't extend.
You are right.
It's the people who, who are well-heeled financially who want the extension.
The purpose of the
So when you preach the law to those people, they will tell you no. They understand where you are coming from. You have no money to...
I don't have, but that's not the reason. Okay. The reason is that the CBN wants to contain corruption. All these people, they want to contain vote buying. They want to prevent people who have been keeping money in their houses to spend. And Buhari wants to have an election that will be free and fair. One way of ensuring that one is to make vote buying very difficult.
Anyway, the CBN, in their statement, as you know, they've made it very clear that there will be no further extension before the election. And all they want to do is to move from over 75% in trying to get money in circulation back into the system.
February 10.
Yes, yes. So I hope Nigerians will not plead for further extension. But Professor Awurawa, thank you for joining us. What do you think?
Thank you very much. On the two issues that we are, talking about, let me begin from the second, because I disagree with Professor Akinterewa on this extension. I strongly support the extension because the CBN, unfortunately, didn't do what it ought to do. You know, we'll be saying this all the while, that the CBN is behaving as if we have eternity to be able to, do this swapping and all that. And we are where we are now. We predicted that this was going to happen, and it has happened. First, the policy itself was not properly thought out. You know, the exchange started 16th of December. And then the new threshold for withdrawal, 500,000 per week, was supposed to comment on the 9th of January. That was a mistake in itself. They ought to have been aligned. That threshold should have been on the same day that the exchange was supposed to start. Because when the new Naira note was, supposed to commence on the 16th of December, the money was not available because the CBN wanted to ensure that people do not withdraw everything waiting until that night. And unfortunately, even when the night came, the money was not available. You just commented the other time. I mean, where my office is, or the University of Lagos, there is an ATM just, across the road that I can see from my office. And all the ATMs on campus, none is working. I do not want to believe that the CBN is saying the truth when it says that enough money has been distributed to all the banks. All the banks couldn't have gone to, hold a meeting to shut down their ATMs. They also make money from the ATMs. So the issue is not, I support the architect to the extent that using this, policy to ensure that vote buying and other, illegal things are not done. But the CBN itself has not been able to do what it ought to do. This sending people to the interior to go and exchange money and all that ought to have started from the very time that, from that 16th of December. This started only last week or maybe 10 days or so ago. Why should they wait to the last minute? There are people who have money who cannot, who cannot exchange the money. A friend of mine just told me a few days ago, he sent money to the mom at home. The mom normally will go to the bank. They will take the ATM to the bank to go and withdraw the money. The mom cannot withdraw the money because the new notes are not there. When they got to the bank, it was the old note they were dispensing. And the people in the market have stopped collecting the old notes. What would she do? So I agree with that to the extent that, yes, the new Naira note design and all that will help to, sanitize the electoral system and all that. But the CBN has not done what it ought to do. So we hope that, I also agree with our, guest, the former Lagos Chamber of Commerce, director, that the extension will be meaningless if the right things are not done. So what the CBN ought to have done since 16th of December, that I started doing just a few weeks ago, it must not do with vigor, so that the 10 days that they are adding now will be fruitful. If that is done, we'll still be home and dry. So everything still lies at the doorstep of the CBN. If the commercial banks are holding the money, the CBN will go after them. And the CBN governor, I listened to him a while ago, he said both EFCC and ICPC will also monitor. Let them monitor and ensure that the money is given and that the money that is given circulates. Then on Adeleke and the voided governorship, all one can just say is that let's just wait for the appeal court, the other levels, to look at this matter. We have not read the judgment, but all we know is that votes were deducted from Adeleke, which enabled Oyetola to now leapfrog him, which was why Oyetola is now declared winner, so to speak. Of course, Adeleke will be there until the process of appeal is concluded. I don't want to go into the details because I do not have the details. But I can say is that both INEC and everybody needs to learn from this, because the new technology that we hope will help us to sanitize the electoral system was put to test.
We can't discuss.
We're not talking about overvoting and all that. There are issues that need to be corrected, in the technology, the beavers and the rest of them. So the lesson we need to learn is to look at what happened. Was there actually overvoting? How did it happen? Question. So that in the next in the main election that we're expecting in the next couple of weeks, the flaws can then be corrected, and then those are the things we will learn from. But let's just wait for the appeal to run its course, and we'll see what side will triumph at the end of the day.
Okay, Professor Akindele, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, let me ask you this particular question based on the submission of Professor Awarawo. Are you of the considered opinion that within the next 10 days, what the INEC, what the CBN, what all the political stakeholders ought to do will have been done in the next 10 days? Because the submission of both Ashim Abioye and Professor Awarawo is that there is need for extension. Why? Because CBN had not done what it should have done. And now, but he's simultaneously arguing that not until what should have been done by CBN is done, then there will not be need for extension or extension. So this time the problem now is not the extension of date, but the problem of when the CBN will be able to do what it is expected to do.
Well, what the CBN governor has consistently said is that the CBN has taken measures to make sure that the notes are available and that they've supplied notes to the banks. The question to ask is, why is it that the banks are not dispensing the notes? They were instructed to dispense the notes via the automated teller machines in the banks. If you go around now, most of those ATMs, they will tell you no cash to dispense. I mean, from reports from people. If you go to the banks, as of Friday, were dispensing old notes. They too do not have the new notes. If you go to Bureau de Change, nobody in the Bureau de Change has the new notes. And yet, the CBN insists that there's more than enough new notes in supply. So the question is, who is sitting on those new notes?
The saboteurs.
The CBN also said that banks were instructed to work on Saturdays and Sundays to take in the notes. Not all the banks are working on weekends to take in the old notes. Okay? 3, the CBN says it has introduced a cash swap program targeting people at the rural areas.
Yes.
Now, that again does not seem to be working. So, is there a magic that the CBN can perform on all of these fronts within this period of extension?
Not possible.
All of that, what happens is what will determine what will happen. There will be more people at the banks tomorrow. There will be more people at the ATMs tomorrow. We just hope that this will be managed with good reason. And some people have pointed out that, have you seen any rich man going to ATM or queuing up at the banks to look for new notes? So one country, two different systems. But let's move on, Professor Awurawa and Professor Akintenewa. Let's take this, another extension of deadline. Nigeria's election management body, the Independent National Electoral Commission, has again extended the deadline for the collection of permanent voter cards by 1 week. The exercise will now end on February the 5th. This is the second time that the Commission will be extending PVC collection nationwide. Well, the thing speaks for itself. The INEC, Independent National Electoral Commission, responding to concerns of people, responding to the fact that we have seen riots, protests, either in Oluyole in Ibadan, or Kukumaiko in Lagos, or in other parts of Nigeria, that people cannot have access to their permanent voters' cards. Has now said, okay, we'll give you another week extension. Again, to go back to your question, what is the guarantee that persons will get their voters' cards? And also, students, many of whom are in school, who registered elsewhere, all this within a week, what is going to happen? What are the steps that INEC would take beyond mere extension to address the concerns that have been expressed? I'll start with you this time, Professor Awurawa. Professor Awurawa, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Okay. I can hear you.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, again, I fully support it. You know, we've been saying this over and over again. If people have gone to, register to process their PVCs and they're having difficulties, collecting, extension to enable them collect is just the right thing to do. We have been talking about registered voters versus voter turnout. Of course, one factor in voter turnout is PVC. When people don't collect their PVCs, it's assumed that they are registered voters, but they have not collected their PVCs, so they can't vote. Saying that will also not alter INEC's preparation, because it's just collection of their data is already there. It's just collection of the cards. So just a couple of days to the election. It makes sense. It will enable those who have had difficulty. Some have, collected relatively easily, but in some places it hasn't been as smooth as expected. And so the move by INEC to extend, it makes sense. It will enable virtually everybody that has PVC to collect. I was saying last week that one state, they announced that over 400,000 PVCs have not been collected. Just look at it. How many people are in that state to vote? The total number. a little over a million, and you have 400,000. That's like 40% of the total number had not collected. So it is in line. It makes sense. It's rational. Let's of course, that should be the addendum, is that there should be an enlightenment campaign to get people to go and collect these PVCs, so that they will not be disenfranchised on account of not having collected their PVCs.
Well, Professor Akintenewa.
Our own enough is enough. Yemi Adamelekun, most unfortunately, is not here. He had already argued on this platform that in many advanced countries, the issue of PVC shouldn't even arise. That we do have the national passport. We do have the national ID card. We have all these means of identifying oneself to be eligible to vote. What prevents us from making use of what we already have, especially in light of the fact that people have BVN, they have a national ID card number, all those things. So I think that saying that people do not come to collect their PVC something is unnecessary burden on the Nigerian people. More importantly, let's look at the systemic approaches adopted in more advanced countries. Please, nothing prevents the INEC to get all these courier services in place if they really mean to put a democratic foundation in Nigeria. If they strongly believe that PVC is what they want to require to vote, then please, within 1 week, especially courier services that do not have any job for now, create jobs for them within a twinkle of an eye. Give them 1 week, 2 weeks, all the PVC cards, and dispatch to them. They are going to be delivered and they will sign. In the US, including sensitive strategic documents, ID cards, they mail them to you, and they will say acknowledge within the next 72 hours if the days fall into weekends, 48 hours if it's during the week. So why is it that you must make the life difficult for the Nigerian here? There's absolutely nothing that is made simple for the people of Nigeria. You want to buy fuel, you must quarrel there. You will see big people in very good ties now blowing grammar, fighting themselves there when people want to jump you. You want to get admission, you want to go to job, everything, life made difficult. Why should it be so? Why not simplify all these administrative something? For me, my position still remains there is no good basis to extend any date. Think twice before you fix a date. And when you fix a date, let the deadline be deadline. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Every time people come out to be lobbying, all right, begging, and then the government will always yield. How can the government be respected? So the attitudinal disposition of the Buhari administration is very predictable. You can know.
Well, Prof, just one clarification. I think the whole idea of making sure that people get their PVC is because the law says the BVAS recognizes only the PVC, not any other form of identification. And then you are talking about courier service. Courier service by INEC to send the PVCs to people in a country where there is no postal code, where some streets don't even have numbers, and who will pay for those courier services that you are talking about?
The Agboile of Abati, you want to find it in Ibadan, they know. Look, even if there is law, you can always make your law, you know, make it compliant to make life easy. You see, it's not that I'm not aware of the fact that the law requires that beavers will be the only legitimate tenable way of voting. What I'm saying is that already, without introducing the beavers itself, we have some valid national ID card. Whatever they do now in Nigeria, you go to any services, they ask for your telephone number. Telephone number will bring your
I guess what you are saying, they need to harmonize data.
Yes, precisely.
So that we don't have multiple
something
and duplication of data. But maybe we'll get there. We were not at this point in 1999. This Electoral Act 2022 is a process, an evolutionary process. But
it's good, but the politicians do not want it to work. That's the issue. That's why the CBN is fighting them. And we should support CBN.
Well, we the people have the right to have our say, but we also have a right to vote. Okay, let's take another topic. Let's take an international subject before, if there is still time, we'll come back to the local arena. The Kremlin claims the West is now directly involved in the Ukraine war after agreeing to send state-of-the-art tanks to the front lines in the fight against Russia's invading forces. After weeks of bitter infighting, the US and Germany this week finally agreed to give in to Volodymyr Zelensky's demands, that's the president of Ukraine, and sent 31 M1 Abrams tanks, that's the Americans, 14 Leopard 2 tanks, that's Germany, and also Poland also wants to send Leopard 2 tanks and give allies permission to send their own supply. The expectation is that by February, about 200 tanks will have been supplied to Ukraine. And also, Ukraine is asking for F-1 jets. The deal has been hailed as a potential game changer in the conflict. A furious Russia has lashed out at the deal and threatened escalating the war beyond the borders of Ukraine, while slamming a barrage of missiles into Kiev overnight. Professor Awurawo, let me come back to you again. This looks like NATO getting into this battle through the back door. Professor Awurawo, are you there? Okay, we'll go back to Professor Awurawo. Let me start with it. This is NATO getting a foot into the door. And will this lead to further escalation? Now that Putin is threatening to use nuclear missiles if it comes to that, and he has threatened to set those tanks on fire, and Zelensky says he wants jets, fighter jets. Now, if all of that happens, won't we have a full-scale Third World War on our hands?
Well, I thank you for your observations already. You are saying, are we not going to have? My position is that we already have. You only need to go back to history. Second World War didn't start in 1939. That is why I have always differentiated between battles and war. The Second World War started as far back as 1931 with the war in Manchuria. Those are the dynamics. The mere fact that in 1938, 1939, you now have someone riding bicycle, the German will take advantage of that one to lock something. Please, what they normally call war between Russia and Ukraine is not war. It is simply the battles, manifestations of the war. And now, if you go back to, I think, in October, Russia first of all gave a notice of provocation. In December, Russia renewed the notice by saying provocation again. And Russia is trying to say that already NATO countries are aiding and abetting development of nuclear weapons underground somewhere in Ukraine. Now, Ukraine, as of today, has been the operational theater of the battles. So when Putin is now saying, and you are correct by saying escalation, Russia is simply pushing the battlefield beyond Ukraine to Western Europe. The implication is this, as I've always referred you to how the Americans entered into the Second World War. America didn't enter into the war. Japanese compelled the Americans to enter into the Second World War when the Japanese miscalculated by thinking that by destroying the vessels in Pearl Harbor, it would take the Americans 6 months, clear 6 months, before they can reconstitute them and then come and join the Allies. No, they were completely ignorant of the fact that the Americans were developing atomic weapons by that particular time. Now, today, since Russia had been giving notices, NATO countries refuse to take note of what they have been calling provocations. Now, if Russia is now saying again for the third time that if they are pushed to the wall, that they will use such weapons, we cannot rule that one out. I can assure you, without any scintilla of doubt, that Russia will carry out that particular threat. They can use nuclear weapons, and the implications will be so disastrous for African people, because Western Europe will first of all be the first immediate victims. Unlike the Second World War, unlike the First World War, when the European countries who generated the war itself can capitalize on the raw materials from Africa, from their colonial countries, those opportunities will not be there. That will certainly divide Africa into many parts. France can no longer rely heavily, as it used to be, on the Francophone support. So Africa itself has partitioned their people along all these issues. You know that the American government itself said they will sanction any African country that will vote against American interests. Joe Biden made this thing clear.
They haven't been able to do anything to South Africa. South Africa is planning another drill with Russia and China. Professor Awurawa, your input on this subject.
Recent developments in the Russia-Ukraine war are very concerning. They are very concerning because, as the Russians have pointed out, the support that the West has decided to give Ukraine in the last couple of days would, of course, strengthen the military capacity of Ukraine. And it also signals an escalation of the war. We were thinking that diplomacy will gain momentum and reasonableness will prevail. That would lead to a cessation of violence between Russia and Ukraine in the last 2 months or so. Since neither side is able to gain an advantage, it's now looking like a stalemated war in which there's no clear winner in sight. We thought that will encourage, leaders of both sides to begin to consider the diplomatic option. Unfortunately, that has not happened. What has happened is an escalation. The West is giving more support to Ukraine, and Russia is not backing down. And so nobody knows when this war will come to an end. And it's certain that it's a war that will not come to an end anytime soon. It will likely drag on for years. And dragging on for years with disastrous consequences for Russia and Ukraine and the rest of the international community. Russia, yes, had its grievances. It had its concerns, from late 2021. And of course, before the war started in February 2022. And now we are getting close to a year now that the war has gone on. But as I've argued several times, there were still options for Russia to explore. A war shouldn't have been declared when it was. Some people support Russia, don't agree with me on this, but war is too serious and the consequences are too drastic to go into as simply as Russia did on the 24th of February last year. There were still options to explore to prevent this catastrophe that now confronts the international community. Where Russia has talked about using nuclear weapons, let it go ahead and use it. Both the victor and the vanquished will perish. In fact, by now they will have used it, but for the fact that they know that both them who are using it and those they will use it on, none will survive. And like J.F. Kennedy said in October 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, to think of a nuclear war is to think the unthinkable. If a nuclear war takes place, every man, woman, child on earth will perish. And if anyone, by miraculous configuration, survives, the living will envy the dead. The Russians are aware of that. That's why Putin has not used nuclear weapons. But to go back to the support that the West is giving to Ukraine, we hope that all sides to this conflict will realize that no winner will emerge anytime, maybe in a decade. No winner will emerge because the West has enormous amount of nuclear military resources to give to Ukraine, which will make it impossible for Russia to be able to defeat Ukraine. And Russia too is a great, not a superpower, but a great power that will not likely be defeated very easily anytime soon. These realities should make all concerned with this war to seek a diplomatic solution as quickly as possible so this war can be brought to an end.
Professor Urawa, you cannot be more correct. But let's take one more topic, and that will be our final topic. The federal government says it will no longer tolerate strikes and riots in the aviation sector. And that was after flights were grounded last Monday at the Murtala Mohammed International Airport in Lagos due to a strike by aviation members over issues bordering on outstanding wages. The strike was later suspended after the management of the National Aviation Handling Company, NACO, said it had commenced negotiations with its workers. NACO provides ground handling, passenger, and other services to several international airlines, including Air France, KLM, Qatar Airways, Ethiopian Airlines, Delta Airlines, Virgin Atlantic, and Turkish Air. Addressing the development in Abuja, Aviation Minister Hadi Sirika described the action as wrong, inhuman, and against the law. Nigeria's major carrier, Air Peace, says it will lose about 500 million naira to flight cancellations, just as industry stakeholders condemned the strike action. Well, big embarrassment to Nigeria. Qatar Airways had to go back to Doha. Passengers were left stranded. The matter was eventually, the strike was eventually suspended. But for the image of Nigeria, it looked bad. For passengers, they went through a lot of, discomfort. And there's no guarantee. Even if they say, oh, class action, the airlines will claim force majeure. The striking NACO, aviation members will claim that they have the rights to industrial dispute, industrial negotiation. So on all fronts, it's the grass that will suffer. Well, Professor Akintere, I don't know whether you went through the airport at that time.
It is not just the grass.
You were in Abuja.
It's not just the grass that suffers. We should not even be talking about the strike of the workers. We should be talking about the strike of passengers, ordinary passengers like us. If I tell you my very bitter experience at the airport when Overland Airlines canceled our flight from Abuja to Akure, you cannot just imagine. And this time, when you even ask them for alternatives, Air Peace was supposed to leave Abuja for Akure the next 30 minutes, but they say that they don't have any contract with them. Now, 10,000 naira from Abuja Airport to the township, and coming back, now spending 20,000 naira for nothing from my own meager pension resources. So we, the ordinary people, we suffer more than the workers that are going on strike. What the federal government should do is not simply to say you want to proscribe. Don't proscribe. It's their right. But ensure that there is no injustice. If you do what is right, they will not go on strike.
Okay, very quickly, Professor Awurawo.
Yeah,
workers strike.
Yes, the strike, I think it was hasty, really. They had genuine cause to, grouse, but I think it was hasty. I think they could have engaged, the aviation, the leader of the aviation sector more to avert the strike. So
they served notice. They served notice, Prof. They were ignored.
Yes, they did.
The matter even went to court. Yes.
Yes, we know. See the consequences, for instance. But again, the greater blame goes to government, which doesn't seem to do anything until things turn topsy-turvy. So this is a lesson for the government, that the government, when labor groups that have legitimate grounds make their presentation to the government should not go to
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
That is the only way to avoid this kind of embarrassment that we had a few days ago.
Well, thank you very much, Professor David Aworowo. Thank you very much, Professor Akintenuwa. You've been watching This Day Live, the Sunday talk show, here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati. From our entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching.